A story of betrayal and one divorce. I got married right after university, at 25. It just so happened that in my final year, I met the one, and I completely lost my head. Absolutely and utterly. I wasn't bothered by the fact that my beloved was 8 years older, or that she had a 10-year-old son. Love is blind. We met, I moved in a couple of months later, and we got married 9 months after that. Another 9 months later, our shared son was born. A few months before this event, we moved into a newly completed apartment, my apartment, bought before the wedding. The first 5 years were relatively good and peaceful. Family income gradually grew. We bought a good car. My wife and children traveled to Turkey and Egypt every year for vacation, and I worked. She, meanwhile, took care of the children and the house. After maternity leave, she insisted on going back to work, first at her old job as an accountant, but then the devil made me do it, and I got her a job at the company where I worked. At that time, I was the head of the fuel and lubricant sales department. It was a diverse company, and it so happened that I worked on the 5th floor and she worked on the 1st. First as an ordinary manager, and 6 months later as a department head. Everything was going well at work. My wife had a team of employees, young guys and girls aged 22, 25. They celebrated corporate events and holidays together with their departments. And around this time, the first warning signs began to appear. First, I noticed that in the evenings, my wife started actively corresponding on Odnoklassniki and ICQ with some old acquaintance. Nothing special, and I quickly stopped it then, or so I wanted to believe at the time, but a residue remained. Although I blindly trusted my significant other, and she was quite good at persuasion. What an idiot. Then problems with sex started. My wife tried to go to bed earlier, or her stomach, head, ass, or little toe on her left foot hurt. There was always an excuse. On this backdrop, scandals and quarrels erupted. In the evenings, everyone was busy with their own affairs, maximally distancing themselves from each other. I'm no angel, I confess. Over these years, I had let myself go, gained weight, and spent my free time playing tanks, drinking beer, or lying in front of the TV. A dream man, in a word. And as a father, not so great either. And we lived like this for about another year. Now, looking back, you realize the ending was predictable, and it wasn't long in coming. One fine day, 70% of my wife's employees submitted their resignations and left for a competing organization. A couple of weeks later, my wife, groaning and wringing her hands, started to brainwash me about how tired she was of working there, how the general manager was a tyrant, how she wanted to change jobs, etc., etc. I supported her. She wrote her resignation, worked for 2 weeks, and against this backdrop, she ruined her relationship with the general director, who tried to persuade her to stay. He started pressuring her, and in the end, I snapped too, and we both went off into the sunset. But in reality, only I went into the sunset, as my wife quickly got a job at the company where her subordinates had previously fled. And I, being in a job search, spent 2 weeks going to interviews and found a job at a completely different field, even in the fitness industry. Well, since things turned out this way, I decided to completely change my life, change outwardly, inwardly, and improve family relations, taking advantage of the opportunity. I went on a diet, lost 25 kilograms in 2.5 months, a topic for a separate post, and immersed myself in the new job. Parallel to this, events were unfolding that I didn't register at all at the time, because as I wrote earlier, I was an idiot, and blindly trusted my significant other. And she was quite good at persuasion. What an idiot. Then, active correspondence on ICQ started in the evenings, supposedly with the same company. And the classic, a new phone appeared and she stopped parting with it altogether. There were other signs, but it's too tedious and long to describe them here. And then one beautiful Wednesday evening, my beloved wife tells me that she urgently needs to go to work for some mandatory event. She hops in the car, and I stay home with the children. About 40 minutes after she left, I decide to call her. I don't remember why. The call goes through, and I realize that the phone turned on in the car, but my wife doesn't know about it. For about 20 minutes, I listened to her conversation with some man. It was hard to hear, but I grasped the gist. After some time, she noticed, realized I had heard everything, and hung up the call and turned off her phone. She returned 2 hours later, immediately confessed to cheating, and said she was leaving and didn't want to live with me. At the same time, when asked, who is the lover, she made up a whole novel, saying he was a single man of 32. She herself was 39 at the time. Divorced, they had met recently, were not seeing each other for long, etc., etc. And what about me? I was an idiot, with beautiful branching antlers. I forgave her. We had a son. He was only 5 years old. How could he grow up without a father, I thought at the time. In the end, I gave her 2 weeks to think about it. Either we save the family and she breaks all her outside ties, or we go our separate ways. Those were the 2 most hellish weeks of my life, comrades. It's hard to express my state in words. And my wife continued to go to work. And in the evenings, she would go for walks in the park with our child. After 2 weeks, she announced that she wanted to save the family. But she wanted to go to nature on the last day, to the lake, with that same company from her previous job, to relax, and she would take the children with her so I wouldn't suspect anything. I, being an idiot, I repeat, flattered by the chance to save the family, allowed her to do so. On Saturday morning, they left, and by evening, I became anxious. Suspicions arose. I saw a bag she had left behind, and going through it, I stumbled upon a flash drive. A flash drive with photos. Carl. In short, I looked at them and understood everything. It was hard not to understand, given what was in those photos. I finally understood what a cretin I was, how pathetic and insignificant. It turned out that my wife's lover was a 22-year-old guy, only 6 years older than her eldest son. She had started an affair with him there, and all her subordinates knew about it because they all hung out together. And the worst part was that at that very moment, while I was looking at these photos, she was still hanging out with my children and her lover at the lake. Naturally, she only returned the following evening, and her belongings were waiting for her in the hallway. Then came the divorce, and then a series of other amusing things, but that's a topic for a separate post, if anyone is interested. Continuation of the post, A Story of Betrayal and One Divorce. My wife returned on Sunday evening. She was already prepared to move. Yes, after the fascinating viewing of the spicy photos with her, I finally managed to reach her by phone, share my impressions, and mentally prepare her for a change of residence. Let me clarify right away. She had an apartment, or rather a 50% share in a 3-room apartment, inherited from her deceased grandmother. It was certainly possible to live in it, but not comfortably, as repairs were only in their initial stages. So she temporarily moved with the children to a young married couple from the same company, and she lived there for a month and a half. Only later did I realize this was my wife's hastily conceived 2-week plan: to calm the horned deer, to dull in his vigilance, to quickly do some cosmetic repairs, preferably using the dear's money, or at least not inconveniencing herself in the process, in Grandma's apartment, and comfortably move there with her beloved and children, away from her hateful husband. All plans were ruined by a carelessly left flash drive. In short, she picked up her things and moved out. And for me, comrades, personal hell began. Those who have been through this will understand. The most terrifying thing is to be alone with your thoughts and the realization that you have lost everything and can no longer change anything. All that's left is to wander around an empty apartment and quietly howl with anger, resentment, and despair, slowly going mad, and in moments of exacerbation, thinking about taking your own life. But, of course, I won't do that. Strangely enough, my friends helped me out of this state. One, for example, upon hearing my story on the phone, blurted out, "Wait, I'm coming," and he rushed over the next evening all the way from Udmurtia. For 3 days he pulled me out of depression, dragging me to various establishments and constantly being by my side, not letting me sink into myself. In the end, it worked. I felt a little better. But that's all lyrical. Life went on. I filed for divorce, and the court gave us a month to think. My wife and I agreed on the division of property. In essence, there wasn't much to divide. We split the furniture and appliances. The apartment was mine. The car was on credit. In the end, she left it to me, with the additional burden of shared and my own debts as compensation. I didn't object. I immersed myself in work, got into the gym, and spent my free time with friends. I registered on a dating site and started going on dates. On weekends, I picked up my son, sometimes brought and picked him up from kindergarten. My ex-wife never hindered my communication with the child, by the way. A few days before the divorce, waking up one morning with a terrible hangover after a wild night out, I called her number to arrange when I would pick up my son. And during the conversation, I suddenly blurted out, I didn't expect it from myself, I was obviously still drunk and not quite adequate, "So, you haven't had enough fun yet? Aren't you thinking of coming back?" To which I received the answer, "Not yet." When I heard this, I suddenly realized that I no longer wanted it. And that was it. From that moment on, it was as if a switch had been flipped. All the suffering, the turmoil, the emotional distress and regrets vanished instantly. The following week we got divorced, and each went our separate ways. My ex-wife finished the renovations in the apartment and moved in there with the children and her beloved. However, for some unknown reason, she kept this fact hidden for quite a long time. Why? Unclear. But as a result, when I once visited my son, I had warned them of my visit. My son was sick, I couldn't pick him up, and I just brought him some fruit and sweets. I stumbled upon the smug face of the young hero lover who decided to assert his rights, show who was the boss and the main alpha male here. A rather ugly scene ensued with a skirmish, a fight, squeals, women's screams, and neighbors coming out onto the landing, and all this in front of the child. Since then, I have never gone up to that apartment again, and I picked up my son at the entrance. 6 months passed, life went on as usual, and I met a girl, the one I had been looking for all this time, 2 years younger than me, unmarried, and without children. Everything quickly developed, and 4 months later I proposed to her. I didn't hide this fact from anyone, and less than a week later, my ex-wife appeared in the chat. A strange dialogue ensued. "Hi, Wetter81, I wanted to apologize for how I treated you and handled things. Water under the bridge. I honestly don't care anymore. God will forgive. You live with it. I heard you're getting married again. Yeah, news travels fast, I see. Well, don't rush. Think carefully so you don't make mistakes. Thanks for your concern, but I've already thought through everything carefully. Okay, bye. You too." What was that? I didn't understand, nor was I particularly keen to find out. 3 months later, I got married, and we went on our honeymoon. We returned. New worries, affairs, plans, and problems appeared. I still tried to pick up my son once a week for the weekend, and what was going on with my ex-wife wasn't interesting at all. And that would be a beautiful, happy ending to the melodrama of my life. But someone up there decided that ending the story like that wasn't right, and that an element of comedy, surrealism, and trash needed to be added. In the autumn of 2013, I received an SMS on my phone. "Hi, Wetter81, this is Pavel. Yes, the very same 22-year-old hero lover. I'm writing to you. I want to apologize for how that incident occurred in the entrance and for inadvertently being the one who contributed to the breakup of your family. But in reality, it's not my fault. Your family was already broken up. Your wife cheated on you before. I apparently was far from the first." Here he added some details and specifics, based on which I am inclined to believe him. "You have a wonderful son, and I am very sorry that he suffered in this situation." To say that I was dumbfounded means to say nothing at all. I replied to him, "Well, the fact of my ex-wife's betrayals doesn't really bother me much now. What do you want?" "She did the same to me. A greedy, unprincipled, and lying bitch and creature." "That's no news." "Well, how is it? You're doing well?" "Help me. Let's punish her together." What? What a surreal situation, comrades. Listen, I don't care about your squabbles in relationship with my ex-wife. I have another family. I'm happy, and I'm not interested in this. Understood. Then good luck, and don't hold a grudge. What was that? Naturally, at first, I heartily laughed at the situation. It became wildly interesting through mutual friends and my mother. Yes, my mother loves her grandson very much and continues to communicate with my ex-wife. It annoys me, but I can't do anything about it. I tried to find out what was happening, and it turns out it was fun. As expected, the romantic flair ended after a year and brutally shattered against the harsh reality of family life with 2 children. The 22-year-old guy, what a surprise, turned out to be unprepared for such a turn of events. He earned little and couldn't provide for the family. In addition, he got hooked on drugs. This is according to the ex, not necessarily true in fact. Quarrels, scandals, and conflicts began. I understand that it even came to physical abuse. In the end, the guy was kicked out, and he started calling parents, acquaintances, friends, relatives, the boss, and the director of the company where she worked, and he dumped a whole box of all her dirty laundry on them, slandered her, told everything he knew, and generously seasoned it with nastiness from him personally. He really messed things up, in short. He even wrote to me. He didn't stop there. One night he scratched, broke the mirrors and all the windows on her car. She bought a Chevrolet Aveo. He stalked her at home and pestered her until she filed a police report, changed her phone number, and finally moved. And now, this is truly the end of the story. Everyone will draw their own moral.